Good evening and welcome to the Marin Interfaith Council's Getting to Know Your Neighbor's Faith, Ask Me Anything. And this is our third evening that we're doing the third Wednesday of every month. And so I'm so glad you're here in person and those of you who have joined us on Zoom. Our speaker tonight is Macha NightMare, and I'll read a little bit about her. Next month, I'll let you know we will have Sherna Deemer from the Baha'i Faith, who was our first speaker, and we had technical difficulties. So we're having her do it again so that we can involve more people and hear better. So thank you for joining us, and we'll get started. So how this will work is I'll introduce Macha, and then she will talk a little bit about her faith and what she believes. Oh, and happy winter solstice. Then you can ask questions. If you're on Zoom, you can type a question into the chat and Scott will read it off. Scott is manning the computer tonight. And I'm Aline O'Brien. I always forget to introduce myself. I work with the Marin Interfaith Council as their community engagement associate. And if you're here in person, you can raise your hand and we'll call on you. And so that's how the evening will work. And thank you all for being here. So Macha NightMare, Priestess and Witch, whose given name is Aline O'Brien, is a ritualist, both solo and collaborative, interfaith and environmental activist, and a published author. Macha was in the original of Reclaiming Collective in San Francisco. Reclaiming has evolved into a craft tradition. Macha co-created with Starhawk the Pagan Book of Living and Dying, practical rituals, prayers, blessings, and meditations on crossing over. Voted #1 advanced pagan title by reviewers of PanGaia magazine, and is author of Witchcraft and the Web, weaving pagan traditions online and pagan pride, honoring the craft and culture of Earth and Goddess. She has contributed to many anthologies, religious studies, textbooks, encyclopedia entries, and guest blogs. Macha holds elder and ministerial credentials through the Covenant of the Goddess. A member since 1981, she currently serves as one of the Covenant's national interfaith representatives. Cherry Hill Seminary, where she has functioned in several capacities, currently as an advisor, awarded her MDiv honoris causa. She is also an advisor to Compass, Commons of Modern Pagans and Spiritual Seekers, where she works with the Pagan History Project, Thanatopsis, looking at death and death ministries, and Hematite Inmate Ministries. She serves Wiccan inmates at San Quentin State Prison and Wiccan patients at Napa State Hospital. She's a member of the American Academy of Religion, the Nature Religion Scholars Network and Marin Interfaith Council, a cooperation circle of the United Religions Initiative, and a founding member of Marin Interfaith Climate Action. She also serves on the Sacred Dying Foundation Advisory Council. Since she sees her life work as fostering pagan solidarity, she enjoys immersing herself in the diverse community that is American witchcraft. Wow.
That's what I was thinking. U.S.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here on this very important night. I'm here to talk about craft. It's most commonly called Wicca because that's sort of a less threatening word, but there is a little difference. All Wiccans are witches, but not all witches are Wiccans. I'm a witch. It's got a history. The word is challenging for a lot of people, but that's why I took it, because I come out of second wave feminism. So it's very contemporary. It's new and it's old. Ancient future religion. There's a creed that a woman named Doreen Valiente wrote that I wanted to open with. She was a significant figure in the 50s and 60s in England. It says, "Hear now the words of the witches, the secrets we hid in the night, when dark was our destiny's pathway, that now we are bringing forth into light. We bring forth into light." And one of our other prominent teacher around the Bay Area, a man named Victor Anderson, who's they're all past people, He says, our religion is a living fossil. It is an ancient cave painting we bring to life.
Speak a little louder.
Yeah, sure. And if you, we have a PowerPoint for the people in Zoom, and some of that, what I just read, is on there. But two other prominent writers, Janet and Stuart Farrar, wrote in 1981 that Wicca is both a religion and a craft. As a religion, like any other religion, its purpose is to put the individual and the group in harmony with the divine creative principle of the cosmos and its manifestations at all levels. As a craft, its purpose is to achieve practical ends by psychic means for good, useful, and healing purposes. In both aspects, the distinguishing characteristics of Wicca are its nature-based attitude, its small group autonomy with no gulf between priesthood and quote congregation, and its philosophy of creative polarity at all levels, from goddess and god to priestess and priest. Wicca, sometimes known as the old religion of the craft, is an ancient religion of love and nature. It's a life-affirming, earth and nature-oriented religion that sees all of life as sacred, interconnected, and interdependent. It honors the natural world as the embodiment of divinity, immanent as well as transcendent, and experiences the divine as feminine and often masculine and or other gendered. Wiccans, Druids, and other pagans celebrate 8 major holidays, the turning of the wheel of the year, beginning with the new year at Samhain on October 31st. And tonight is one of the main cross quarters, or one of the quarters, the longest night of the year, which I'll say more about later. So we begin with Samhain, the new year, and that's October 31st. A lot of these holidays that I will mention, you will recognize from pop culture, because they haven't really died, they've been kept alive in pop culture. So you'll recognize, I know you recognize Halloween, Day of the Dead. The four other solstices and the equinox are solar. That's one of the ones we're doing now is in a solar one. And the 4 cross quarters follow the Northern European agricultural calendar. 2, it's Samhain or Halloween, and Beltane or May Day remain popular in secular culture, largely unchanged. The former grieves and honors the dead, and the latter celebrates the brightening and warming of the year. And Scott, as I'm reading this, I think you could probably follow the slides a little bit.
Slide is on the roots of modern witchcraft writings of.
There's some pictures. It's hard to, I thought I was going to be able to do it from here, so we're limping along and I ask your forbearance. You'll still be able to get a lot of information. So there's one piece of liturgy that's shared by all Wiccans. We have a lot of different iterations, you know, like the Pope is Christian, and so are snake handlers in West Virginia. They're all Christians. There's a lot of different kinds of pagans. But they all do share, not all pagans, but all witches and Wiccans share this one piece of literature. It's called the Charge of the Goddess. And I have it with me, but I won't read it now because for time, but we might want to hear it later. Our primary beliefs are that we should live without harming others, the ethic being, and it harm none, do what ye will. It values personal experience or gnosis, which is unverifiable personal gnosis, or UPG as it's called, which means it can't really be duplicated, but you know it because you've experienced it. We're informed by pre-Christian and indigenous mythologies, folklore, and traditions, and as such, we honor our ancestors, all of our ancestors. We acknowledge the principles of magic. I've added a K to that. It's frequently used as an alternative spelling to distinguish it from prestidigitation. So magic is spells, which are generally aligned with the natural forces too, with the moon. If you're doing a release, you want to do it when the moon is waning, for instance. We may be pantheist or panentheist, animist, polytheist, or henotheist. And pluralist. We have no dogma. Experiences and values are what we share rather than belief. But commonalities among the traditions include nature, including humanity, its manifestation of the divine and deserving of reverence. And as I said before, all life is sacred, interconnected, and interdependent manifestations of divinity. What we call goddess imbues everything. Gods and goddesses are part of divine, and we are responsible for our own lives. When we do ritual, everybody in the ritual participates, no observers, no spectators, and as each person learns, they take responsibility for priestly duties. Many covens have what is called a high priest or high priestess, but not all. Our rituals take place in a circle that's created by the people who are present. The space may be swept clean, symbolic of clearing bad energy, hence the witch's brew, sweeping everything clean, get bad energy out. We begin with a group meditation, which is usually meditation on the tree of life, where we are a tree and we reach our roots down, our branches up. And we face each of the cardinal directions, east, south, west, and north, and what they do is calling the quarters. So we acknowledge the spirits that are embodied in those four quarters, and that would be air is in the east, and fire is in the south, and water is in the west, and earth is in the north, and spirit is in the center. And in terms of pantheons, we often invoke deities, one or more, and we proceed with either what they call a working, it's like when we're doing a spell, or the celebration, which is when we honor these important holidays like now. And we conclude with a shared beverage and food. It's called cakes and wine. It isn't necessarily cakes and wine. Food is simple for Esbits, which are monthly meetings. And I have a slide in there of monthly meetings. You might have found it. I'm sorry I can't do them both at once. But, and the food is simple for Esbits, the juice and a baked good, like a loaf or cakes. And at the conclusion of a Sabbath ritual, we have a big feast, big meal, which customarily full meal is often traditional foods and beverages specific to the Sabbath being celebrated, such as Irish soda bread at Imbolc, which is the Feast of Bridget in February. It's early February. Pantheons, in addition to, depending on one's personal ancestry or calling, some contemporary practitioners engage with Native American, Filipino, Japanese, Brazilian, Hindu, Southeast Asian, or other pantheons. And we do have practitioners around the world, so a lot of people have adapted it to their knowledge and their ancestors and the land that they live on, and from which they gain their sustenance. In our contemporary world of blended peoples, different deities from different ethnicities in different parts of the world. We may choose to honor and or worship any deity or deities in any pantheon. Generally, if a coven is used to one, they'll just stay with the same one, but there is choice. The choice of whom to invite into the sacred circle may be seasonal and reflective of one's ethnicity. It relates to a geographic place, dependent on who calls or for any other reason. And among the more commonly honored pantheons are Celtic, Germanic, Norse, Greek, Hellenic, Latin, there's one called Hellenismos, which is Greek, Egyptian, and Kemetic. Kemetic is a little different from Egyptian. Egyptian is, they use Egyptian deities in craft context, but Kemetic is a reconstructed religion of ancient Egyptian religions. Baltic, Latvian, Lithuanian, Estonian, there's one called Romava in Europe, but it's mostly Europe, it's here too. I'm sorry. You don't want me to start over again, I'm sure.
Keep going.
So we assemble our tools that were needed for ritual on an altar. It's covered with cloth and holds the tools. A blade for air, a wand for fire, a cup or seashell for water, and a pen for earth. I like to have salt and water and candles and incense. I like to have something representing the natural world on all my altars. So I might have a crystal or a geode or something for earth, some feathers for air, seashells for water, and so forth. And then the incense and the candle are plenty of fire. We always have that. Well, actually, not in all the prisons you can't have candles, but we do, fortunately. Erecting an altar is a sacred act in this part of the ritual. When you start getting ready, some spaces are constructed with an altar at every quarter as well. And when we conclude a ritual, there's a communal sharing, which I mentioned before, often specific to the season. And that comestibles may be placed on the main altar or separately. We bless the food before sharing, and there are some blessings in that slideshow somewhere, and some examples of altars. And a small bit of each item is poured on the ground, or well, it's not always ground. You can take it outside if you're inside. The experience engendered by the ritual may leave celebrants a bit disoriented or spacey, so eating some food regrounds us in the material world. I have some stuff in the slideshow about deity, which I imagine you're probably interested in, but I didn't write it out because I thought I was going to be able to do this. Let's hang on. I'll tell you. The roots are in the writings of a few people. One is Gerald Brousseau Gardner, who was a British writer, and he first published, I think it was 1951, which was when the anti-witchcraft laws were removed in Britain. It's that recent. So most of what I'm talking about is since the 1950s. Margaret Murray was an anthropologist in the early days of anthropology, much discredited now, but she was valuable for opening things up and ideas. A guy named Robert Graves, who was a mostly poet. He wrote a book called The White Goddess, which is very, I want to say seminal, but it's not germinal to most witches. And another anthropologist, folklorist named Charles Godfrey Leland. Again, the early part of the last century, around 1900, was when these various sciences were created: anthropology, archaeology, sociology, and so forth. So that's folklore. So that's why they're part of the reason it's recent. So there's the triple goddess. She's the main one, I think. So usually maiden, mother, and crone, but she can also be other things like the fates. They're common. We get that from the White Goddess, the book that I just mentioned. Goddess is immanent. Her divinity is the entire material and immaterial world. She exists, operates within, and permanently pervades the universe. And there is a slide for that. I don't know if you found it. It's there. I have some beautiful pictures. One is real live people personifying these deities, and some of them are artwork from all different eras and different cultures. The god figure is usually horned like goats, like Puck, or antlered like a deer. The horned one lives among people. The antlered god, the lord of animals, symbolizes the wild and untamed in the animal nature of both humans and in the world. Then there's the green man, and he lives in the unfathomable forest and in all growing things. So they, again, have a lot of manifestations. Jack in the Green is often, you might have heard songs about Jack in the Green, or he's one of them. And in England, people actually dress on green leaves. You know, there's a whole man walking around in leaves, being the green man for the day. And the Lord of Animals has a lot of manifestations. He's very popular. And I have a lot of wonderful pictures of him in there that might show up if I can find them. And then there's a particular kind of witchcraft called Diana, which is goddess only, and it's usually women only, although not entirely. When it's women only, it's based in part on the blood mysteries that women experience, men don't experience. But it's eclectic, creative, and spontaneous. They celebrate the lunar cycles and women's bodies. Again, the triple goddess, maiden, mother, and crone are the three times of our lives before woman. The earth is a goddess, that it explores women's wisdom as expressed in world mythologies. They practice healing and shamanism, and it's about reclaiming power to some extent. I am one of these people, an older kind of witch, who came to the craft through second wave feminism. When I discovered the whole notion of feminine divine, it just kind of changed my whole life. That's not the case nowadays. There's other reasons people find, because second wave feminism's got a bad name these days, but that's how I got it. And I have some pictures of Dianic rituals. There's a wonderful temple to Sekhmet in the desert in Nevada, out on western Shoshone land, about 40 miles from Las Vegas. You can go and visit it. It's quite marvelous. There's a big statue of Sekhmet in there and other deities. It's open to the public, but only females can stay overnight there in their facilities. And there's a wonderful goddess sanctuary not far from here in Geyserville. It's called Isis Oasis. Some of you may have heard of it. It's really wonderful. It was a Baha'i place, actually, and they sold it. When Freeway went through, it split their land, so they sold it. And one of our friends, Lori Van Hay, bought it and rededicated the temple. And it now has wonderful stained glass windows that are all Egyptian themed, because Florian was a member of a group called the Fellowship of Isis. It's available for use. Lots of weddings and stuff happen there. It's a community center, and I have pictures of that too. There are some orders that are dedicated to goddesses. There's one called the Order of Bridget in Count Kildare, and then there's one, I can't say this right now, but it's dry. Ordre de Brigada, which is an international order of flame keepers. Bridget kept a flame going for 19 days. It was tended by priestesses. It was extinguished, I think, around 400, and then it was relit later by some nuns. And it is, if you've been to Kildare, you can see this flame in the well. And every 19 days you take a watch. You burn the candle for the whole day. You have one of those 19 days. All these people, many of them are Christians. They're all religions, people dedicated to Bridget. And Bridget is the fire in the forge that shapes and tempers. She's the fire in the cauldron that nourishes and heals. And she's the fire in the head that incites and inspires.
If you can speak towards the mic, I sure it might be helpful.
So I have pictures of my monthly differences. I don't know how much you want, if you want to start asking questions, because I think I told you kind of roughly the overview.
Yeah, I think it would be, I think there's probably a lot of questions out there. So,
Good.
I shouldn't see this. We'll have to have a time where we can just have the PowerPoint. So, yeah, I know, I think for so many of us, our only understanding of witchcraft comes from movies or history books, which are negative, as you talked about. So, original, for me, and this is my question, I guess, the original witchcraft has been around for as long as people, or, mean, because an earth-based,
Depends who you talk to
yeah,
and how you define it.
okay.
I mean, we like to think there's an unbroken line, but in terms of a really formalized, or it's not really even very formalized, but in terms of a movement, it's only recent.
Within the 20th century?
Yeah, since maybe 1930, maybe. It's been in the broom closet. We call it in the broom closet. One thing I will say about witches that I think is great is that we have a sense of humor, and we have to because we've been mocked for a lot of years. And one of the things that one of my friends created, which I've done a few times, is way fun, is called a besom brigade. A besom is a witch's broom. It's a broom. There's actually a royal besom maker in England for king and queen, but the besom is a broom. And we have what we call a besom brigade, and it's a marching, it's kind of like drum majors and stuff. We have brooms, we twirl them, we do formations with them, we wear a black hat, we have stupid little nursery rhymes that are witchified that we use, and we do that in public. There's some wonderful pictures that were taken right before we went into Iraq, when there was all the anti-war demonstrations. We had a big cadre of about 15 or 20 people with black hats, twirling brooms, and singing great stuff about, we called WOW, which is opposing war. So we do have a sense of humor. We have to have a sense of humor. Yeah. And there's in some countries, particularly in Africa, you can't use the word no matter what you're doing, because people get murdered. People accuse, kids of I know, or a kid gets born with a deformity, it's some witch put a curse on them and they'll kill the person that they think did it. So in that sense, we don't use the word, and Wicca is a nice color word for that. But in a political sense, in the Western world, I use witch.
Are there any questions in the room?
You mentioned a night as I remember the Baha'i faith, and you mentioned the 19-day cycle. That was intriguing to me. How long has that been going?
As far as I know, way back to Bridget, I mean, that there was a cult of Bridget in Kildare before there was Christianity in Ireland, so I don't know how far back it goes. There is a well-known, as I said, it ceased for a while, and then there were, believe it or not, Protestant sisters who relit it. Made a big deal of it. It was in '93, it was relit. This was several hundred years it was out. And you can go there, they're very welcoming. They have like a kind of a tract-looking house, and they can come into their worship space and meditate or chant.
I just asked because the 19-day, you mentioned the 90-day cycle.
I don't know where
the Baha'i faith has a 19-day monthly calendar, 90 days in a year.
In a year?
Yeah. So that's where we meet every 19 days. So we meet
Oh,
every
I
Sunday.
see.
90. So
it's not like every
long
month.
history of 19. So that's the see where that goes from.
We generally meet on the full moons and sometimes on the new moons, and those rituals are called Esbats. And then the wheel of the year, 8 holidays are called Sabbats.
So for those of you, if you couldn't hear online, the question was asked about the 19-day cycle, and Macha knows it from the times of St. Bridget, or from, I say St. Bridget, that's my Christianity.
That's all right.
Bridget,
We'll take it.
of Bridget in Kildare, but the Baha'is actually celebrate or gather every 19 days, so that there's some deeper or larger.
Yeah, like Christians do every Sunday.
Yeah, larger connection between the 19 days then, so.
We have 3 questions from online. One is, how big is the community and are there young people involved?
That's a good question. It's hard to say how big we are, although we are pretty much, there's a lot more people out of the broom closet. The Pew Research considers that we're one of the fastest growing religions not a religion, or a cluster of religions, but around. And I think we address needs that some of the more Orthodox religions don't necessarily address because the world changed so much. For instance, there's a book called Pagan Book of Living and Dying, which I co-authored, which was mentioned earlier. And there are rituals in there for instance, releasing a donor's essence from their organs. That's not anything in the Bible because they didn't transplant organs. One is withdrawing life support. So we've tried to address more contemporary things that are dilemmas for people that they're confronted with. I don't know where I was going with that. Sorry.
Children, are there
Children,
young
yeah. We asked me the young people. We used to be all adults and in the closet, and we used to practice, and still do, in many cases, what is called sky clad, which means you're clad in the sky, which means you don't have any clothes on. And the reasons for that are, one is there's no distinction between the royalty and the peasant. We are all on an even level when we're naked. And the other is it allows for the free flow of energy through the body. Other people use robes to get the same effect with robes and stay a little warmer. But there's a whole, I was at the AAR last month, American Academy of Religion annual meeting, and there was a presentation there. One of the presentations was about TikTok witches, which is kind of a whole other animal that I don't understand. There are people that, they kind of want to be, they want to be something outre and different, but they're not necessarily connected or care to be connected with any of these groups that have been going on. There are family covens, and most of the, I should back up and say, a lot of the pagan culture in this country and elsewhere has formed in the context of summer festivals, like week-long festivals, not in people's day-to-day life. So then they find, there's all these other pagans that they didn't know about because they were being, and that web has made a huge difference because people do stuff online now. You could have a witch down the street you didn't know because everybody's being low-key about it. But there are more things for teen. There's now a teen witch camp. There's a lot of children activities. There's some books about raising children and with a lot of kids stuff to do for like baking moon cakes for particular holidays, stuff like that kids can do. But in the earlier part, like say from 1950 to maybe 2000 or so, there weren't very many kids. It was too secret. It was too, like when I was a single mom, I told my daughter not to tell anybody that her mom was a witch, not because I was ashamed of it, because I thought she'd get a lot of grief in school, and she would have. And now a lot of kids are proud of it. There's even a Spiral Scouts movement, which is kind of like Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. They're pagan and they're run by pagan families. There's also the Coven of the Goddess, which I represent, has what they call the Heart, H-A-R-T as in deer, Heart and Crescent Award, which is for Scout. It's like a religion badge for scouting and Heart and Crescent. That's all new, like 30, 40 years maybe. But it's more integrated into society as opposed to hiding away in the woods, dancing under the full moon, jumping over fires, which we like to do. Still can't hear, huh?
No.
I don't know what to say. You can hear, can you?
Yeah.
We can. You can?
Your voice goes up and down a lot.
I think
It's a big empty live room.
And there's a lot of background.
It's part of the problem.
Okay.
I don't know,
do you have other questions, Scott?
Yes. How does one find a coven in Marin?
In Marin. Well, I don't know. There are some groups there are some covens that are teaching covens. I don't know of any in Marin at the moment. And there are some traditions that teach. And they form classes which often evolve into a working group. after the 6 weeks or a couple months or a year, whatever it is. There is a group that I was affiliated with and am no longer, but is very active in the whole world actually, but especially its home base is the Bay Area. It's called Reclaiming. And they do teach classes, and they also have public Sabbaths. They have them in, let's say, the East Bay now. They have them in San Francisco. They have them, sometimes they have them like Sebastopol, San Jose. It's catch as catch can though. But if you go to their website, there's all kinds of stuff. They're the ones that have the teen camp as well.
What's the website?
Reclaiming.org.
Reclaiming.org. Scott can put it in the chat.
And the other one is, I would recommend is Covenant of the Goddesses, which is cog.org, cog.org. And that's national. It's people from wherever. And there's a couple of Facebook pages. There's one called there's Northern California Local Council of the Covenant has a page, which supposedly is good. I'm not active now, so I don't know everything they're doing, but I think they're supposed to be listing events and public opportunities. So, but I have to say that the overall mindset in this country is more proselytizing than we are. And I'm pretty hardcore anti-proselytizing, and I feel that the quest and the seeking is an important part of the path, finding your way there, which is not to be hidden. Plenty of people are hidden, and it used to be really hard to find the covenant, but now it's not so hard. And generally, if you ask, you probably know people that are witches, and you just don't know it because they don't pro it out loud. So that's not much of an answer, but seek and read some books. Go to occult stores and herb stores, places like that. They have conventions often, and they have classes sometimes. There's a store in Sebastopol called Milk and Honey. I think they have classes there, and I know they have resources, if not actual classes, like lists of events and stuff.
More questions?
Let's go.
Any in the room?
I also could hear a lot, and then sometimes I
Oh,
couldn't.
sorry.
So
It's the room, not me.
Totally. You may have answered this already. It's just what I'm saying. So I'm sorry if I'm asking you to repeat. But would you talk a little bit more about this day and rituals around today?
Actually, I had something I was going to read about today.
Let me just, the question was just about today, since today is the winter solstice, this December 21st. So if she had anything she could talk about.
I do, and I meant to print it out, and I forgot. So I'm going to have to read it off the screen. But I have it here.
Speak really loudly too.
I will. Ready? In our modern world, we tend to take light for granted. We're used to living constantly amidst all manner of human-made lights. We seldom reflect on the fact that for most of human history, our only sources of light came from the sky and from fire. We easily forget that there was a time when torches were a new invention, oil lamps were valued possessions, and chandlers toiled so people could see in the night by candlelight. Of necessity, our ancestors lived their lives finely attuned to nature's cycles of light and dark, and then later of cycles of sowing and reaping. They knew that their lives depended upon the sun, so they created rituals to ensure its annual return. Today, many homeless people remain acutely aware of the changes in sunlight throughout the seasons, and they also bed down at nightfall like our ancestors did. In fact, marking the return of the light was so important to them that at least 5,000 years ago, some of our Western European ancestors built megaliths such as Brú na Bóinne in Ireland or Maze Howe in Scotland. Bruna Boyne, or New Grange, is a mound near the Boyne River, which is named for Bowen, a cow goddess. It's comprised, the Bruna Boyne is comprised of a passage leading to inner chambers carved with spiral designs. The builders constructed the mound so that the light of the rising sun on midwinter morning shines a shaft of sunlight deep inside to illuminate the innermost chambers. Some ancestors decorated their dwellings with evergreens. They cut a tree and decorated its branches with twinkling little candles. This tree represented the world tree that unites the underworld, the middle world, and the upper world, and it never dies. I think humans are hardwired to gather around fires, especially during the long nights of winter. Other ancestors gathered around a Yule log. Yule is a Scandinavian word, usually taken to mean wheel, to keep warm through the coldest night of the year as they sat together, while bards and elders told stories, musicians played, and people sang and danced, ate and drank. We pagans, at least the majority of us, view the winter solstice as the night when our Great Mother labors to bring forth the reborn sun god. We see in images of Mary and the baby Jesus something ancient and primal. It's an icon that speaks to us. When we perform these acts, when we sing the carols, trim our trees, light candles, we reenact the things our ancestors did. We reconnect with them, and we honor our heritage. Celebrating midwinter together allows us to reaffirm the continuance of life. I wish all a joyous solstice, warmed by the loving hearts of friends and families and a toasty fire.
It's beautiful.
Thank you. And I will say that there are other ways. One of the, at San Quentin, I facilitate the Wiccan Circle. And as you know, it's a male prison. And I'm not used to working with men, and I'm used to being very intimate, which you can't be in any of those contexts. I've had to figure out things that are appropriate and meaningful to inmates, male inmates. Interestingly enough, almost the entire coven are men of color, although I consider that this came from Western European traditions, very adaptable to the multicultural world, but I find that's kind of an interesting thing. But one of the things that I have done, we've done with them on the winter solstice, which is different from vigiling while the mother is in labor, is there an old English tradition of the year is being divided into two halves, one ruled by the Oak King and the other half by the Holly King. And they have a battle, symbolic battle at the solstices, both the winter and the summer, where one defeats the other and they take over that half of the year. And I have found a very beautiful colloquy from a guy named Dave Laborde, a British guy, a colloquy between the Oak King and the Holly King. And that's what we do for the main part of the celebration of winter solstice with those men.
What was it, the oak?
Oak
And the
King, Holly.
Holly.
Holly and Oak, yeah. So I thought that was kind of, for want of a better word, better role models for men. It's like we don't have those kind of seasons in California, but still I think a lot of us are attuned to them, at least culturally. So people do it all different ways. Some people make moon cakes or sun cakes. Some people are up all night telling stories. A lot of people do divination, the longest night. Tend to stay up all night. I don't know, I'll make it tonight. If that answers your question.
I have two more questions online. Do witches use psychedelic plants, and if so, how?
Many do, and they are called entheogens. The terminology means that the God or the divine is within the plant, and theos being God, divine. So they're called entheogens, and some do, and some don't. Some really do, and some avoid it like the plague. So yes and no.
And someone else would like to find out about death rituals.
Well, I can talk about them too, but I actually thought of something else about what we were just saying about entheogens, and that is that when they are used, they're not just for fun. They're used in a controlled circumstance. They may involve fasting or all kinds of preparation, and in a setting that's very significant to what the person is seeking or the experiencer intending to have. And that's universal. It's not just craft. It's all over the world. People do that. So I just want to add to that. So death and dying. I'm just involved in a new group called Thanatopsis, which you mentioned in the introduction. Thanatopsis is a Greek god ruling all things to do with death. And we're a new group looking for people to work with us. But one of the things that's really popular these days is death doulas. It's kind of a thing. But I don't think you need to be a death doula. I think you can vigil the dying. I find that it doesn't happen often for me, but if I'm asked, I will vigil with someone who's dying, and that's a very, very sacred thing to do. If you're talking about afterlife, I don't know if the question goes into afterlife or the actual dying, but we have rituals for preparing, including practical, mundane things like writing your will, having that stuff prepared, what's going on. So you're not leaving your loved ones. It's bad enough you're leaving your loved ones, but then to leave them with all these problems and decisions to make about your possessions and stuff like that is not nice. So yeah, we emphasize that. Sometimes in certain situations we will have a person make their own shroud, make a shroud that they're going to use. Maybe only used ritually, may eventually be used when they pass. We have some chants and songs that are done as people are dying if they want them. A lot, in my experience, when you have to use your intuition and your connection with that individual. The main thing that I emphasize is it's their death, not yours. It is their experience, not yours. So you can't come in with an agenda and try to lay your agenda. It's not right. So you kind of follow how it's going. And of course, there's all kinds of deaths. You know, there's sudden ones, and there's long ones, and there's, you know, agonizing ones, and there's peaceful ones, and there's, you know, there's murders and suicides and all kinds of deaths. So there's all kinds of ways to try to deal with it. We do have stuff in the Pagan Book of Living and Dying about, as I said, withdrawing of donor systems from the organs, but also healing from stillbirth or abortion, or the loss of a child. We even have stuff for kids that lost a pet. Because it means, you know, it means something to them. Their pet's gone. And we have things about how to washing the body in a sacred way, and certain ways you touch it. I mean, I think most religions have that stuff. I don't know what it all is in other religions, but I know what ours is, and it does involve touching 5 places and saying words at each place. So what we call the 5-fold kiss is what is done when they're alive. When they're dead, it's an anointing with spring water. So I don't know if that's an answer you were looking for, but if you're looking for the afterlife, it's a whole other animal.
We have another 2 more questions, and then we have 9 minutes left. So just doing a time check.
And you wanted to do a little 5-minute closing, right? So
I'll just ask the two questions at the same time then. May men participate, and if so, how? And what's on your hands?
Absolutely, men can participate, and I have California poppies on my arms, if that's what you're asking.
What are they?
They're California poppies. Because I used to be on the broomstick circuit. When I was traveling, I could put my hands on the ground. That's where they grow from. When I first came to California, it was in June, and we came across overland and into California through Tahoe. And these hills were covered with these amazing orange flowers. And I've had a passion for them ever since. That was in 1959. And finally, when I was 62 years old, I put them on my arms so I could see them growing. Because most people have tattoos, you can't see them. You can't see your own. They're, in strange places. But I didn't need to get a job anymore. And there was a time you couldn't, in my area, you couldn't get a job if you had tattoos of any kind, even if they're innocent little flowers. So that's just all my flowers. And the other part of the question was,
How men may participate.
how men? They can participate the same way that women can. There are men's covens and there are mixed covens. I would say probably most covens are mixed. There are few men covens. And they do the same things that women do. Except they don't do Dianic stuff that's based on blood mysteries. And there are also people, other gender expressions, for lack of a better term.
A good question, Martin. You've talked a lot about the past. I'm wondering if you have a vision for the future.
I do, and that's part of the chant that I want to teach you tonight. Yeah, because we don't have a clear vision, but we know that we got to make some changes, or we're not going to have one. So that's one of the reasons I've been involved in environmental activities. Because most people have their head in the sand, as you know.
Most people
Have their head in the sand. The overculture does a lot of stuff to distract us from knowing what's really going on around us. We're more concerned with Kardashians, and I'm not, but you know what I mean. There's a lot of escapism out there. And that's fun for some things and for a while. So this little chant is a song by a man named Charlie Murphy, who's passed now, a lovely man. And it's called Light is Returning. And here's how it goes. It's sort of peppy. I'm going to sing it through a couple times. I'm hoping that people who are here will sing it with me or join in when you feel that you know it enough. And people online can see it and do it to put yourself on mute and do it with us. So, ready? Light is returning, even though this is the darkest hour, no one can hold back the sun. Sorry, I'm not do you know that copy? I should know it. Let's keep it burning. Let's keep the light of hope alive. Make safe our journey through the storm. One planet is calling, circling on her path around the sun. Mother is calling her children home. Light is returning, even though this is the darkest hour. No one can turn back the dawn. Let's keep it burning. Let's keep the light of hope alive. Make safe our journey through the storm. One planet is turning, circling on her path around the sun. Mother is calling her children home. Light is returning, even though this is the darkest hour. One can hold back the dawn. Let's keep it burning. Let's keep the light of hope alive. Make safe our journey through the storm. One planet is turning, circling on her path around the sun. Mother is calling her children home. Light is returning, even though this is the darkest hour. One can hold back the dawn. Let's keep it burning. Let's keep the light of hope alive. Make safe our journey the storm. One planet is turning, slipping on her path around the sun. The mother is calling her children home. Come on home, children, come on home. Light is returning, even though this is the darkest hour, no one can turn back the dawn. Let us keep it burning, let us keep the light of hope alive, make safe our journey through the storm. One planet is turning, still on her path around the sun. Mother is calling her children home. It is returning, even though this is the darkest hour, no one can turn back the dawn. Let's keep it burning, let's keep the light of hope alive, let's save our journey through the storm. One planet is turning, circling our path around the sun. Earth Mother is calling her children home. There is an album which you can find on YouTube called Canticles of Life by Charlie Murphy. And this is done with a gospel choir, which is a whole other experience. But it's got a lot of juice to it.
Very pretty, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for sharing your faith and answering our questions, and there's so much more that could be asked, I know.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Well, I'm easily reachable. I have colleagues who are as well, so if you want to know more.
And if you want to know more, you can always reach Macha through us, or, we'll connect anyone to Macha. So, thank you.
Thank you.
I have a couple announcements. Our next, the third Wednesday, next Ask Me Anything, Getting to Know Your Neighbor's Faith, will be Sharna Deemer from the Baha'i Faith Tradition. Before that, though, on the second Wednesday of the month, we always have meditations, and our next meditation leader is Annie Jorgensen from the Brahma Kumaris, and that's at 5:30 via Zoom. So you can go to our website and find all of that, www.marinifc.org. And if you want to make a donation, you can do that too. I'll just mention it, because I do. So thank you all for being here in person and for joining us on Zoom. And thank you, Macha, for sharing your faith with us.